This is an act related to property and immigration status. It prohibits a landlord from asking about immigration status of a tenant, prospective tenant, occupant, or prospective occupant, or residential rental property. Representative Giraldo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the House Judiciary Committee. I am here today to present H5734. This act would prohibit a landlord from asking about the immigration status of a tenant, prospective tenant, occupant, or prospective occupant of residential rental property. As a former landlord of a 3-family home myself, I honestly believe this is not a piece of information that is necessary to the tenant selection process at all. I've rented to several tenants of all kinds over many years, and not once, not ever actually, did the need to ask about immigration status or citizenship arise. Aside from it being inappropriate and unnecessary to ask, I feel like a question of immigration status isn't coming from probably the best places and see no use for it at all. A part of me believes that it could possibly be coming from a place rooted in disdain for people that may be different from the landlord. Maybe a different culture, people that look different, for example. I also know that Americans in general have an overall lack of understanding of our unbelievably complicated immigration system. With our various types of visas, residency permits, etc., it can get confusing. And in other cases, this question can be rooted in flat out, plain old racism, to be honest. Something tells me, as you hear tonight, or maybe read in some of the testimony submitted by others, that question is likely meant to target certain ethnic groups or eliminate them from being potential renters. Or, in other situations, to seize on an opportunity to take advantage of them in one of the most absolute worst ways. A way that to me is un-American and dehumanizing and is disgusting and should not happen in our country or in our state. So as a first step, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but as a first step to preventing this, we as a nation passed the Federal Fair Housing Act. The act prohibits discrimination based on race or color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. And such discrimination is illegal regardless of the victim's immigration status. And so I get a weird feeling that those in strong opposition of this bill may be trying to find a workaround for not being able to ask someone about their national origin. And national origin discrimination is different treatment in housing because of a person's ancestry, ethnicity, birthplace, culture, or language, which is also illegal. That means people cannot be denied housing opportunities because they or their family are from another country, because they have a name or an accent associated with a national origin group, because they participate in certain customs associated with national origin groups, or because they are married or associate with people of certain national origin. But I believe we need to be a little bit more clear and take this necessary step to prohibit asking about status to make sure discrimination isn't happening because of how someone looks. Additionally, it is to ensure that blackmail isn't happening in our communities. It is to make sure that immigration status isn't being used as a way to control people, intimidating them with threats of deportation and possible separation from their children and their families. And I'd like to take a second to talk about how that works. Predatory landlords, many of them that own homes in certain communities, but they don't actually live there, usually located in low-income communities, will use knowledge of their tenants' immigration status as a way to control them, blackmail them, and force them into the worst corners that you could ever imagine. For example, the city that I was born and raised in, more than 75% of the properties are rental properties. And we have our fair share of absentee landlords and bad actors who absolutely take advantage of this. And from growing up in that city and having worked there, I've been privy to several example after example, of tenants being subjected to basically unlivable and deplorable conditions. toilets and showers completely out of service for weeks on end, ceilings collapsing in a child's bedroom, heat not working in the middle of winter for months with no plan to fix it, and allowed to continue because the landlords knew that the tenants may not have had documentation and threatened to call the authorities if they spoke up about the condition in the apartment. The tenants were enticed originally probably by low rent, and landlords intentionally did not advocate or push for a lease as they knew that they would always have the upper hand. And they threatened to not only throw out the family on the street, but in a moment's notice have them have their families torn apart with the push of a few buttons on their cell phone, or at least threaten to do so. And just to be clear, there are disgusting predatory landlords of every race and ethnicity, and I've seen many different landlords like that for myself. So although this bill aims to protect and prevent those sort of abhorrent practices, it makes it so that equity prevails when renting an apartment. I'm happy to know and hear that the Rhode Island Commission for Human Rights, the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the ACLU, and many, many other Rhode Islanders support this bill. This one is an easy one in my eyes, regardless of where you stand politically, and ask for your support of this bill. And I would also be remiss if I failed to urge passage of Rep. Williams' bill that I think you're going to hear later on, and Rep. Morales' bill that you probably just, that I believe you just heard. And I thank you all for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Very good presentation. Any questions of the sponsor? I do not see any, but we have 4 witnesses, which I think that 3 of them have already testified. Christina Contreras Fox is with us. Christina?
Yes, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Well, thank you. Am I on?
You are on, and you're free to testify.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Chairman Craven and members of the House Judiciary Committee. My name is Christina Contreras Fox. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I am the Senior Policy Analyst for the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless. We work in coalition with our members and community partners to create and advance solutions that end and prevent homelessness in Rhode Island. And this includes advocating for policy changes that eliminate barriers in accessing housing and shelter. And discrimination based on immigration status is exactly this kind of barrier. And thus, we strongly support Representative Geraldo's bill 5734, prohibiting landlords from inquiring about immigration status. There is no valid reason to ask a tenant, prospective tenant, occupant, or prospective occupant about their immigration status. Papers do not make a person, and all people deserve safe, secure, affordable home. Housing is not a privilege. Housing is a human right. And discounting someone as a tenant based on immigration status causes significant harm and violence to that prospective tenant and their family. It can and does cause people to experience homelessness. Many immigrants in our state are Black, Indigenous, Rhode Islanders of color who already experience homelessness and housing insecurity disproportionately based on their race and ethnicity compared to white Rhode Islanders. So it is time to take this question off the table entirely. The Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless urges committee members to please get 5734 your full support. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? I do not see any, so thank you very much. That would conclude testimony on Representative Geraldo's bill. Very good job. Thank you.